Roman Polanski's disgusting crimes and his evasion of justice has rightfully been discussed ad nauseum since the day he was arrested in 1977. But what's rarely discussed is that Anjelica Huston, best known for playing the internet's favorite gothic MILF Morticia Addams, was arrested alongside Polanski that very same day. In this video, I want to explore Anjelica's relationship with the director, as well as to pay respect to the victim, Samantha Geimer, by sharing some of her thoughts on the night that changed her life forever. So let's get into it with just a touch of backstory first for context, plus a quick semi-related Marilyn Monroe story because I will talk about her any chance I get. Alright, so it was Tom Wolfe who coined the 1970s as the Me Decade because it was a time when Americans turned inward for self-discovery, determined to escape the wars and social movements of the previous decades. This led to an abundance of sex, drugs, rock and roll, and general hedonism. It was at this time that a young Anjelica Huston was just at the start of her legendary career as an eventual Oscar-winning actress. Anjelica comes from a privileged background and is actually the daughter of John Huston, who was famously the last director with the privilege of working with Marilyn Monroe on The Misfits before her untimely death in 1962. And during the filming of this movie, John actually got into so much gambling debt that he asked for Marilyn to be hospitalized to give an excuse for why production had been halted and to distract as the studio scrambled for money. However, despite this, Marilyn said herself that she loved working with John because he really took her seriously as a dramatic actress, and they had a genuine mutual respect for each other.
I knew she was very good in the picture, but I never dreamed that she would become the figure that she did and still is. I knew she would be good. I was only thinking of my film, selfishly, not of her.
Yeah. When we get back.
Also, side note, did anybody else notice how similar John Huston and Jack Nicholson are? Jack will come up a lot in this story, so just hang tight. Okay, back to Anjelica. Anjelica got her start playing mostly uncredited extras and had her acting debut in Casino Royale, where she doubled as the hands of one of the secret agents. Her first starring role was in A Walk with Love and Death in 1969, but she wouldn't receive much acclaim until she was in her early 30s in 1985 when she won the Oscar for Prizzi's Honor. Up until this point, she was best known for coming from a legendary family of actors and directors, as well as being Jack Nicholson's longtime on-again, off-again girlfriend. She and Jack met when 21-year-old Anjelica was invited to Nicholson's 36th birthday party at his home in 1973, where they hit it off and she ended up spending the night. Nicholson, who had a reputation of being a bit of a womanizer, lived up to his already incredibly low expectations by making plans with Huston a few days after their initial meeting and then canceling on her last minute, citing a forgotten obligation which turned out to be a date with his ex-girlfriend Michelle Phillips. This seemed to be a recurring pattern in their relationship as the years would go on. Anjelica always wanted it more than Jack, and Jack always wanted other women more than a monogamous relationship. Between Anjelica's vulnerable age and budding career and Jack's promiscuity and status as an A-list star, the relationship was heavily imbalanced from the start and likely played a role in Anjelica's reluctancy to leave when Jack's debaucherous nature took its many tolls on the relationship. Around this time, the couple met a 12-year-old Gwyneth Paltrow at an event who famously said she was afraid of Nicholson, and Anjelica agreed, adding, "With good reason, he scares me too." But of course, this didn't stop Jack from asking Gwyneth out years later, and Anjelica tolerated his treatment because, in her words,
I knew what he was up to, but the thing about being with somebody who's that much in the public eye and who is that charming and is that charismatic is that you kind of have to go along with the program. It's not like you're going to break all those habits immediately.
Jack and Anjelica stayed together for 17 years, never marrying or having kids, though Anjelica had always hoped that marriage and a family was in their future, and the absence of this reality may have played a role in the eventual split in 1990. Nicholson, who has 6 children with 5 different women and only married once, reportedly scoffed when Anjelica suggested marriage, saying, Marry you? Are you kidding? Anjelica never had children, as she spent most of her fertile years with Jack, despite marrying in 1992. Unsurprisingly, a man with little morals or ethics like Jack keeps similar company, and in March of 1977, his dear friend Roman Polanski borrowed his home while Jack was out of town. The 45-year-old Polanski would also invite a 13-year-old to accompany him for a photo shoot in the jacuzzi. The girl and her mother would later find out that this photo shoot was meant for a French men's magazine. But his true intentions were even sicker. He plied the child with champagne and a sedative and forced himself on her. But what few people know or acknowledge is that there was a witness that night, sort of. A 25-year-old Anjelica came back to her and Jack's shared home to find Polanski's camera and coat in the kitchen. Polanski emerged moments later from the back room with a 13-year-old Samantha, and they quickly collected their things and left. Roman explained that they had been taking pictures, and Anjelica claimed she didn't think anything of it, stating that the 13-year-old girl looked tall because of her platform heels, insinuating that she didn't notice that the girl was well underage in addition to being drugged. Huston said in an interview decades later that she didn't give the encounter a second thought until the next day when plain-clothed detectives raided their home. She said, "They followed me upstairs and I showed them some grass in a drawer. At that point, they went through my bag where they found a gram of cocaine. That seemed enough evidence for them, and Roman and I were bundled into the back of 2 separate police cars. We were under arrest." And Anjelica maintained in an interview recently that she doesn't believe anything nefarious happened and that it was Roman's business.
Yes, so far as I'm concerned, whatever happened is his business, and I wasn't there for any untoward behaviors, so I can say that with some happiness.
Ironically, she said this just moments after stating that she believes any man who lifts a hand against a woman deserves to be outed after being asked about her own abusive ex-boyfriend. But apparently that doesn't apply to sexual assault.
He was, according to you, physically violent with you.
Well, it's my feeling that any man who lifts a hand against a woman deserves to be outed, so I'll sort of leave it at that.
Personally, I'm of the opinion that Anjelica knew something had taken place, but casual drug use and taking advantage of young girls was so normalized at the time that she had been conditioned to look the other way and not give it too much thought. That is, until the police showed up. And sadly, the normalization is further proven by Samantha Geimer herself, who said, "When I was 13, there was no discussion about rape. There was no date rape. I didn't perceive what happened to me as rape. I thought rape had to be violent. I think it's all worth talking about. If you don't talk about these things, particularly to younger people, how do they protect themselves from it? How do you teach people that it's wrong to do?" She said she drank and took the drugs that he had offered because she was eager to please and because she was a child alone with an especially powerful man being told what to do. But after she asked Polanski if she could leave, he refused, and Samantha said, "I didn't want to have sex, but apparently that's what was going to happen."
So how did you come to get to Jack Nicholson's house?
Well, that was where the photo shoot was going to be, so.
So did your mother take you there?
No, she wanted to go along, but he said that he thought maybe she shouldn't because I might feel uncomfortable or not be natural, I think.
Without getting too graphic, what happened?
Well, we took pictures and, drank some champagne and everything seemed fine, but then as the evening got to the very end, things suddenly took a turn in a bad direction, and I realized that, to my surprise, he seemed to be interested in, more than I thought. So I was scared. I'd been drinking. I was alone. So I didn't know how to handle it. Oh.
She made up a fake asthma injury, illness.
I said I had asthma. I don't know why. To get out of the hot tub.
And sadly, Samantha now finds herself in a strange position to a certain extent, even finding a bit of common cause with her attacker. Because of the infamy and depravity of Polanski's actions, as well as his fleeing of the country, which caused a media frenzy, she feels they're now both condemned to live this chapter out for the rest of their lives. She's been cursed to have the world's harsh eyes on her, defining her entire life by one experience that lives on in infamy. Anytime she sees Polanski's name, it's followed by convicted or 13-year-old. She feels condemned to be followed by this single experience. She spent much of the rest of her life running from this experience, drinking heavily and numbing with drugs throughout her teens, eventually having her first child at 18, later marrying, moving to Hawaii, and having 2 more children. And she's since argued that Polanski should be allowed back into the country to be pardoned. She did an interview with The Guardian that summed it up well, stating, "Her equanimity towards the director is calculated to defend herself from a permanent position of victimhood. People want her to be damaged, and she isn't." Her mother added, "You were never the same after that," and Samantha responds, "That's what happens. I'm probably not the same after many things, as we all are." Over the decades, the narrative surrounding this night has really changed to reflect the times. She commented, "You'll notice the culture has shifted so that everything is swung the other way. Now it's Roman the monster, but back then it was my mom and I the monsters." And she's right. Sadly, at the time of the incident, public consensus had been that Samantha and her mother were lying gold diggers. And this was despite Roman pleading guilty, never denying the charges, just denying that he had done anything wrong. I'm glad that Samantha seems to have done a lot of healing and seems to even forgive Roman for what he did. So how do you feel about it? Do you feel like Anjelica Huston knows more than she lets on? Do you believe Roman Polanski should be allowed back in the US? Leave your comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next week.